Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video we have my Game Week 15 preview, and today there's going to be a specific focus on the best players to transfer in ahead of the final 2 weeks before the World Cup. If you are enjoying the content here on this channel, please do remember to like, comment and subscribe. But without further ado, let's jump into today's video. So I would say the large majority of FPL managers this week are probably looking at needing a forward transfer. We've got Toney having been suspended after being booked in the 93rd minute in Game Week 14, so he's suspended for 15. We've got issues with potentially Haaland being injured. I'm not going to go into massive detail because I think we just wait for Pep's press conference, but he hasn't been in training. Looks like there's a reasonable chance he could be out against Fulham, so that could pose an issue. We've also got Mitrovic, has two tricky fixtures now against Manchester City and Manchester United. So we're in a position now where we look at our teams and we probably need at least one, potentially two or three. And like for my team, for an example, I've got Firmino in my team. He could also pose an issue. So I think most managers at the moment are probably looking at a minimum of one forward transfer. So I thought what would be a great way to start this video is to basically go through some of the forward options that we've got, because there are some obvious ones and some ones that I do still think are fantastic despite being obvious, but also some that maybe could be going under the radar. And something that I would say at the start of this video is when you've only got 2 weeks left until we basically get a complete reset, it doesn't happen very often. It's usually at the end of the season where you've only got like 2 weeks or 2 weeks before a wild card, for example. I think it's worthwhile taking some punts and just having fun with it. And I don't think you necessarily need to transfer in the optimal player with the best data. That's not to say don't look at data, because that's what today's video is going to be on. But it is to say if you've got a bit of an idea that you think someone could do well. For example, I love Calvert-Lewin, as we'll move on to in a second. His data doesn't support that he's going to do very well over the next two. But if you fancy it, why not? Because you're going to reset your team in 2 weeks anyway. You might as well have a bit of fun for the final 2 weeks and take a punt, because it could go well over the short term. So I've got basically as many strikers as I could fit on the screen here, as many forwards I could fit on the screen. There are some that would, of course, be omitted. There are some decent options outside of this. If you think there's someone I've massively missed, let me know down below in the comments. But these are the strikers that I'm looking at today. We've got price, minutes, projected points over the final 2 weeks, their non-penalty expected goal involvement per 90 this season thus far, give you a bit of an idea about their data, and also their fixture difficulty according to Fantasy Football Hub over the next 2 weeks. So we start off with the two cheapest players, and they are both of the Bournemouth strikers. Now, I'll be honest, I have absolutely no idea if Kiefer Moore's going to play the next 2 weeks, but a lot of people considering after his performance in Game Week 14, and he did take both the goals very, very well, and he could be a really nice option at 5.4. But when you look at the data, Solanke is more likely to play every minute, so I think that is massive over the final two, and he's on penalties, and even if you take penalties out of the equation, Solanke still has better data. So for me, when I look at this, I don't mind more if you can't afford Solanke, but I think if you're going for a Bournemouth striker, because they've got Leeds and Everton over the next two, I really don't mind either of them, but I would probably go for Solanke myself. Slightly more expensive, but still cheap price. You do have Mbeumo. Now, the fixtures aren't great when you look at them as a two, because they've got Forest and then they've got Manchester City. Obviously, I think it's Man City away as well. It's basically the toughest game you can have in the Premier League. So that's why you can see they're 19th for fixture difficulty over the next two. But if you can get away with either selling or benching him in 16, I really do like Mbeumo against Forest. He'll probably play up top, obviously, in the absence of Toney. Will they score goals? Potentially not, but I still think it's a great fixture. Yes, Forest have been a little bit better defensively, but I mean, Arsenal put 5 goals past them, and I do really like Mbeumo. And as I've been saying all season, Mbeumo's putting up pretty good data. You can see here 0.6 non-penalty expected goal involvement per 90, so he could be a cheeky punt at 5.8. I've got Alvarez on there. He is the man on your screen. This massively depends on Haaland. If Haaland is out for Fulham and then potentially for Brentford as well, Alvarez could be a really cheeky punt, right? You're probably going to expect him to play at least one, maybe both in the absence of Haaland. When he does play, as you can see, only played 289 minutes, but puts up relatively good data. And as long as you've got decent movement, I think if you're playing up top for Manchester City, you're going to get chances. Probably not the amount that Haaland does, because Haaland's movement is second to pretty much none in the world at the moment. But I still think Alvarez is an excellent striker. And even if he plays off the right, he could still be a fantastic option. So I really do like Alvarez, but this is massively dependent on if Haaland's out. We'll discuss later in the week. If Haaland is confirmed out, I may well go Haaland to Alvarez and maybe even consider captaincy. Again, that would require Haaland to be out for 2 weeks and to get some leaks that Alvarez is starting. But to answer, there were a few questions around it. I don't mind it. Let's see what Pep says in his press conference later in the week. I've got Danny Welbeck on here. This was a bit of a weird one. He was completely omitted from the Game Week 14 squad against Chelsea. He wasn't in the squad at all, not on the bench. I can't find any news. So let me know down below if you're a Brighton fan. I'm assuming it was like fatigue or illness, because there's nothing about any injury anywhere that I can see anyway. And he's played pretty much every minute available outside of that. So If Welbeck's back for 15, I really like him because, as you can see here, good data, 0.64. He's showed good data all season long, and for the final 6 game weeks of last season, he had the best non-penalty expected goal involvement in the league. So for a while now, Welbeck's been putting up really good data. He doesn't always finish his chances, but the next 2 for Brighton are actually pretty decent. So if you're not going to go for the likes of a Trossard, assuming Welbeck's back and assuming we find out what happened there, I do really like Welbeck as an option. But like I said, let me know down below if you know what happened. I've been trying to find some information and I've got absolutely nothing. But I do really like Welbeck if he's available. At a similar sort of price, you've got Scamacca at 6.7. My issue with Scamacca is his data's okay. It's not too bad at 0.53, but he doesn't ever play 90 minutes. He tends to sort of get 60 to 70. He might get the odd 90, but normally Antonio will come in. And I still think there's a small chance Antonio will get one of the next 2 fixtures in the Prem because Scamacca just hasn't looked quite at it. He's shown glimpses of what he could do for West Ham. I'm still not convinced that Moyes is fully convinced that Scamacca's the starting striker for them every single game. So whilst the next 2 fixtures, Crystal Palace and Leicester, both at home, are really nice, as you can see here, second on the fixture difficulty ticker, I do like the West Ham fixtures, but I think I would rather go for a Bowen, go for a defender, or look elsewhere. I personally am probably leaning away from Scamacca just due to expected minutes. And also the West Ham attack just aren't putting up the numbers that you would hope for, but they are still 2 really good fixtures. I've left Mitrovic on here. As you can see, he is on 4 yellow cards and 2 really tricky fixtures. The issue that we've got is, my word, Mitrovic's data is so good. Still 0.82 non-penalty expected goal involvement from Fantasy Football. That's ridiculously good. And he is on penalties as well. And he plays 90 minutes. A lot of these players, we're looking at per 90 statistics, they don't even play 90. Mitrovic will play 90 minutes for you. And he's putting up such good data. And yes, it was frustrating that he took 10 shots in game week 14 and didn't get anything. But that's incredible, right? That he got the opportunity to take 10 shots. The XG that he continues to accumulate is ridiculously good. I think there's definitely justification to keep Mitrovic and just play him against City and Manchester United. Because you would expect that if Fulham get a goal, Mitrovic is going to be the one to do so. And I would back Fulham to get 1 or 2 goals across the next 2 fixtures. So I don't hate keeping him, but I myself am looking at selling him just because I feel like the fixtures are there for other teams to potentially target. But when I'm looking at if I sell Mitrovic, one of the options is actually DCL. We'll move on to DCL now. The stats aren't great, right? 0.32 non-penalty expected goal involvement for DCL versus 0.82 for Mitrovic. So even with the fixtures coming up, I do wonder, does it make sense to downgrade Mitrovic as much as that to a player that's not putting up great data? Now, he's only played 279 minutes this season, Calvert-Lewin, so I think it's too small of a sample size really to draw from. But regardless, DCL's never put up data like Mitrovic is putting up now. This is ridiculously good for Mitrovic. So I do wonder, let me know down below in the comments what you're currently planning on doing with Mitrovic, because with City and United in the next 2, United have looked really good defensively recently, and City are, of course, the best defence in the league. They don't look like 2 very good fixtures, and I would definitely be tempted to sell him, but maybe not for someone like Calvert-Lewin when I look at the data, although I am still tempted. I think the one that's going to be very popular this week, and probably the one that I would advise, is doing Mitrovic to Wilson, because when you look at Wilson's data, Wilson is putting up very, very similar data to Mitrovic, 0.79 non-penalty expected goal involvement. And Newcastle have slightly better fixtures across the next 2. It's Southampton and then Chelsea. Chelsea haven't looked great defensively, so I think those are actually 2 decent fixtures. And he is in a bit of a hot streak at the moment, Wilson, on the back of obviously 4 returns in game week 14. It could be the time to jump on him. Now, something that I would say with Wilson, it might sound patronising, I don't mean for it to, it's just a good reminder. You're not going to get last week's points. So you need to completely pretty much ignore that 19 pointer that Wilson got last week. Do you think he can return over the next 2? Probably. He's probably never going to get 19 points again, or at least in the next couple. So you need to not expect 19 points from him. What you're hoping for, I guess, is 1, maybe 2 attacking returns in the next 2, and it's probably worth making the transfer. So I do like Wilson. If I'm putting on my sort of sensible content creator hat, if you're asking me for the best Toney replacement and then potentially the best Mitrovic replacement, if you do want to sell either of those, it probably is Callum Wilson. I probably would bring him in ahead of most of the other options here. I am just wondering if I could take a cheeky punt on someone like a Welbeck and Alvarez or a DCL, just to be a little bit different and to have a bit of fun before the World Cup. We've then got sort of 3 more expensive options, and the ones that are playing for sort of the better teams, you would say, which is Jesus, Darwin and Kane. As you would expect, those 3 have the best underlying data out of all of these options here because they're the most expensive and they're playing in the best teams. Jesus is putting up really good data, over an expected goal involvement per 90 non-penalty, which is really strong. The issue we've got with Jesus is he's just not converting those opportunities, and also a lot of that is made up through expected assists. So I don't mind Jesus, but the fact that he's on 4 yellows, the fact that they've also got a slightly trickier fixture this week against Chelsea, although it's not a terrible fixture. Chelsea have been pretty poor defensively recently. I maybe think there are slightly better options. The low conversion rate, The fact that it's made up quite a lot through creativity, the 4 yellows, and the tricky away fixture against Chelsea. I still think it is a tricky because it's away. I would maybe consider other options outside Jesus, but I think maybe if you have Jesus already, I probably wouldn't be looking to sell. I'd probably hold on to him because the data is still really good for Arsenal and really good for Jesus. We've got Darwin in there as well. Darwin did not start in the Champions League tonight. The game's actually ongoing. I'm recording this during the Liverpool game. He's still not come on in the second half. So as far as I know, obviously recording this midway through, Darwin's pretty much going to get either a complete rest in that Liverpool game or he's just going to get a few minutes. So that is really, really good news for Darwin. And potentially really good for a start in game week 15 and potentially game week 16 as well. A bit of a mixed bag. It's Tottenham in 15 and then Southampton in 16 for Liverpool. But I think Tottenham you can definitely get at Tottenham at the moment. Liverpool is still looking relatively decent going forward. And I do like that Southampton fixture in 16. So I think if you can get up to Darwin from Toney or from Mitrovic, I don't hate that as a punt, but he's someone that's not playing 90 minutes. And similar to Jesus, his conversion rate at the moment, at least, is very, very low. He's not taking the chances that he's getting. And then Kane is there, steadily ticking along, getting a lot of penalties as well. But yeah, he is scoring a lot this season, and his data is pretty good at 0.95. Again, if money is no object, Kane is arguably one of the better options for the final 2 weeks. What I would say is just bear in mind, like I said, Mitrovic, Jesus, and Kane, as you can see just to the left of me, are all on 4 yellow cards. So do take that into account when you're deciding to bring them in or not. The 4 yellow cards, by the way, resets after their team that they play for. So, for example, after Fulham play 19 Premier League games. So once Fulham have played 19 Premier League games, Mitrovic's yellow cards will reset. Or should I say the threshold should extend to 10 yellow cards. So if I sort of put all that together, that was 11 minutes talking about the strikers. I would say the obvious option, yes, is Callum Wilson. The data's good. The fixtures are decent. He's on penalties. He's playing 90 minutes and he's in a bit of a hot streak at the moment. Now might be the time to bring him in. There's absolutely no issue keeping Mitrovic, especially if you've got Toney, maybe you've got Saka and Haaland, if either of those are out, and you've got other issues to deal with. I have no issue keeping and starting Mitrovic. The data's there. I could see Fulham scoring against City and United, at least a couple of goals maybe over the next 2. So I don't mind keeping Mitrovic. If you want sort of a cheeky punt outside of that, I've only put players on this list that I like. So I like all of these options here. But for me, I just do like Calvert-Lewin. I think the next 2 fixtures are quite good. He's a similar sort of player to Wilson and Mitrovic in that he tends to put up okay data. He's on penalties and he plays 90 minutes. And he was very close to scoring in game week 14. He just didn't quite latch on to Damari Gray cross. So I really like Calvert-Lewin. And I also like Darwin, if you can get up to him. I think he's a really, really good option. And then at the cheaper ones, maybe Solanke, just because he's on pens, plays 90 minutes. Fairly nailed. This is basically what I'm looking for in a player. 90 minutes pens and also decent fixtures over the next 2. So hopefully that's helped you. Let me know down below what your forward situation looks like. I think if you've got Mitrovic, Toney and Haaland, you're probably in the trickiest position now because Toney's suspended, Mitrovic has tricky fixtures, and Haaland, we don't know about the injury. If you are in that situation, who on earth are you buying and who on earth are you selling? So as you can imagine, there were actually a lot of questions around should we be selling Wilfried Zaha ahead of the final 2 weeks? He's been a bit of a troll in FPL for many years and also over the last few weeks. Do we sell him? But there was also 2 or 3 people asking, is now the time to bring in Zaha? Should we buy him? So I thought what I would do is just look at his data for this season thus far. You can see his touch map on the screen as well. Discuss the fixtures over the next 2. And if I owned him, would I sell him? And if I don't own him, which I don't, am I looking to buy him? So for me, a quick summary of it is I would probably be don't buy, don't sell in my personal opinion anyway. Yes, he's been very frustrating. And yes, importantly, which I've not really drawn on here, don't want to go into too much detail, is in recent weeks, he's a little bit deeper and a little bit wider. I don't think it's as drastic as some people are saying, but he's definitely dropped a little bit deeper and a little bit wider. And he's playing more so as a winger again, rather than as an inside forward, but he does still drift central. He is still the talisman. He is still on penalties. And as you can see by his minutes per appearance, he tends to play 90 minutes. And the next 2, yes, they're both away fixtures for Palace, but it's West Ham, who are a team that I do think you can still get at, and Forest. And I think Forest, again, they are much, much better at the City ground, but that is still a defence that you can target. So I just don't see the value in selling a 90-minute man on penalties with, as we've seen us again, decent data. Not great. Definitely should be improved, in my personal opinion. But with 2 good fixtures, I just don't see the value in selling him, especially when we have the likes of maybe Saka as an issue in our team. If Haaland's injured, we've got Mitrovic and Andreas with tricky fixtures, Toney suspended. I'm wondering how brilliant your team must be to want to use one of your valuable 2 free transfers that you've got in the final 2 weeks on Zaha. If your team's in a perfect position, which it may well be, you've got no issues, all of the injury doubts that we had, they're all fine by the deadline, and you've got like a luxury transfer to use, maybe you go for it. But I may well bring him in 16. That Forest fixture looks primed for a really good return there. So For his data this season, like I said, he's playing pretty much 90 minutes in every game, which is always a positive. His expected FPL points are 5.11 per 90. Without a comparison point, you might not know how good that is. I always say that anything above 5 for expected FPL points is really strong. So I'd say 5.1 is strong. I wouldn't say that's mind-blowing. I think when you sort of get to about 6.57, that's when you're starting to look at a player that, wow, like they're putting up really, really good numbers and their expected FPL points are very high. So 5.11 is good, not great. Maybe doesn't quite justify the price tag, but I think as we're approaching the World Cup, maybe price is less important and you're just looking at the player themselves. His non-penalty expected goal involvement is decent. It's 0.34. I would hope to see that a little bit higher, but he is also on penalties. And for his price, again, I would say that's about average. It's not blowing us away. Again, I would like it slightly higher, but I don't have an issue with that. And his expected assists aren't that low. It's very, very comparable, his expected assists, to previous seasons, 0.19. So altogether, he's putting up a 0.53 non-penalty expected goal involvement, which is actually pretty good. Again, that's not much better than some of the other options. It's a little bit lower than some of the others. As you can see in the previous section when we looked at some of the strikers, it's actually better than quite a few, but it is lower than the likes of a Danny Welbeck and an Mbermo and an Alvarez. So again, I can understand the frustration that he's not even putting up great numbers, and he's also maybe not fulfilling his potential. He's actually underperforming his expected goal involvement. So yeah, I fully appreciate the frustration of owning Wilf Zaha. His touches in the box continue to be pretty good at 5.21 per 90. Again, that's not very high, but that's about what you'd expect for a player in his position. And he's taken 2.5 shots per 90 as well. So when I look at all this, I don't mind this data. And yes, it is frustrating that his position's changed and also that he's not converting the chances. And Zaha just always feels like a bit of a troll. When you need him most and when you decide to transfer him in, he always tends to fail to deliver. And I do appreciate that. But for me, I think if I'm taking my emotional hat off and I'm not being angered by the fact that he's trolled us in the past, with West Ham and Forest, 2 decent fixtures coming up, with decent data and so many other fires to put out for a lot of our teams, I don't think Zaha's a priority sell, in my personal opinion. If you're asking the question, for free, can I sell Zaha for someone else, like a Trossard or a Rashford, as we'll discuss in the next section? Absolutely, I have no issue with that. But again, I wonder if there are other issues in your team that are potentially more pressing than Zaha, if there are other injuries or players with trickier fixtures. So it largely depends on your team. I would definitely not be taking Zaha out for a hit. I definitely wouldn't. I just think with the fixtures, anyone on penalties being taken out for a hit that you know is going to play with decent fixtures, I always think it's a bad idea. So I would avoid taking him out for a hit. I don't mind it for free. If you are going to do it for free, I like the next 2 players we're going to discuss. I've just checked the Liverpool score. Darwin came on in the 72nd or 73rd minute, so he's getting a little bit of game time, but largely rested, which again does look really good for this weekend. And also Salah's just scored a goal, which is frustrating that he continues to score in the Champions League and less so in the Premier League. But that is interesting. Maybe less people will consider selling Salah now. So for this section, I'm just going to discuss Rashford and Trossard. I know a lot of people are asking other questions around like Almiron and different players in the midfield. Over the last couple of videos and the last couple of game weeks, I've discussed in so much detail the midfielders that I don't want to keep repeating the same content. So if you want my opinion on other midfielders, you can see my tweets on Twitter and you can also see my previous videos. But today, I think the 2 players that we're considering most are probably Rashford and Trossard. And for me, in my personal situation, I'm almost definitely bringing in one of Rashford and Trossard if Saka's out. If Saka's not out, I may end up keeping Saka, but that's something to discuss in my team selection video. But for me, yeah, Rashford and Trossard are probably my 2 top transfer priorities for the midfield. And I'll be completely honest, I love both of them. So whilst I will give my opinion maybe on who I think is slightly better, I love both. And if you have 2 midfield spots and 2 free transfers, I genuinely do like the idea of bringing in both Rashford and Trossard. So they're both at a similar sort of price point. And I think, like I said, as long as you've got the money, I think considering there's only 2 weeks to the World Cup now, I wouldn't stress too much. Something I would say, which might play into your thinking a little bit, is Rashford's actually got really good fixtures for 17, 18, 19 as well. So I think there's a very good chance, assuming he doesn't get injured in the World Cup, that we want Rashford on our post-World Cup squad. If that is the case, and he goes up in value over the next few weeks, it might make sense from a long-term planning perspective, at least. I might be overthinking this slightly, to put Rashford in our teams now, get that value to increase on him, and then just keep him in our teams and have him from 17 onwards. So if you're thinking a little bit longer term, maybe you want to have a cheeky Rashford in your team after, then maybe you bring him in now for that reason. But I'd say the fixtures for them over the next 2 are very similar. They both play Villa. Manchester United's is away, so maybe just an advantage of Brighton. And then the other fixture, both away, Fulham away, Wolves away. So I would say the Villa fixture slightly easier for Brighton, but then the other fixture slightly easier for Manchester United. I like the fixtures for both teams over the next 2, so I don't think there's any advantage there. With respect to the data, it's actually extremely similar as well. They're both playing about 80 minutes. Trossard slightly more, Rashford slightly less per game. So both of them getting enough minutes. Their FPL points this season, Trossard is just over 1 FPL point more per 90, but they're both putting up pretty good actual returns. Expected FPL points, Trossard is outperforming his expected FPL points, or overperforming, I should say, and Rashford is slightly underperforming his expected FPL points. So maybe you would expect over the next two to see a little uptick in Rashford and a little downtick in Trossard's. It's difficult to say in such a short period of time. And then non-penalty expected goal involvement, very, very similar. Trossard is just edging it at 0.5 to Rashford 0.45. But if you think back to what we just saw with Zaha, I think it was 0.34. They're both putting up better expected goals, I should say, than Zaha. However, neither of these are on penalties. So, yes, we're looking at non-penalty here, but there is an advantage for Zaha in that if they get a pen over the next two, Crystal Palace, and if Zaha scores it, of course, that is an advantage there. So Trossard just edging him there, but Rashford having slightly better expected assists at 0.26 to Trossard 0.17. So as an entirety, Rashford's numbers are ever so slightly better, but considering Trossard's got slightly better expected goals, I would say that they're basically identical for their data this season. Trossard's getting slightly more touches in the box per 90 at 6.86 to Rashford's 4.73, and you can actually see that if you look at the touch maps on the screen, this is courtesy of Fantasy Football Hub, by the way, you can see Trossard's getting more touches in the box. They're both playing a similar-ish position on the left. I would say that Trossard's played like 4 positions this season under obviously different tactics and different managers. And also Rashford can play centrally as a striker if Ronaldo or Martial's not playing, or he can play on the left. So both of these players have played in different positions, but generally they're playing off the left-hand side. Trossard tends to get into the box a little bit more than Rashford. Rashford tends to sit just outside the box. He obviously loves a shot outside the box when he cuts in on his right as well. So, to be honest, both great fixtures. I really like the look of both. I think they both have that Hall potential. They can both score goals. And the underlying data is very, very similar between the two of them. So I would struggle to give you an answer, and I'm struggling myself if I do bring one of them in. I would probably lean Rashford. It might be a bit of own club bias. I'm a Manchester United fan if you've not watched my channel before. So maybe there's a bit of own club bias there. But I do think that Trossard will continue to tick along really, really steadily. So I don't know. I think it's a really tricky one. Let me know down below. I'm gonna back Rashford for no other reason than I've just got a feeling that a haul is coming with Rashford. But equally, Trossard looks really, really good as well. I love both of them, basically. So there were some other questions asked, and just in the interest of keeping this video, stopping it from being like over an hour long, I'll just sort of quick fire some of these questions off. And also the fact that some of these I don't think warrant a lot of discussion this early in the week. I think it's something to discuss sort of on the deadline stream later in the week. So the first is, if Haaland is confirmed out for Game Week 15, will you sell? My honest opinion at the moment is probably not, just because I have other issues in my team. If Saka's injured, that's an issue. I also have players with really tricky fixtures like Mitrovic, Andreas. I've got Firmino and Salah against Spurs. I've got other places I think that I could use my transfers. And if he's back for 16, I'm going to want him as captain against Brentford. And then I want him back post-World Cup. And you've got to remember, if you sell Haaland now, even if he falls in price a couple of times, you're still going to lose value when you eventually want to buy him back. So for me, if he's just confirmed out for 15 and it looks like there's a very good chance he's back for 16, I probably wouldn't. If he's out for 15 and 16, I'd be extremely tempted by a switch, maybe even to Alvarez. So that's something to discuss. But honestly, I don't think we're going to get confirmation he's out for both weeks. And I don't think he will be anyway. I don't think it's that serious as far as I can see. But it's something to think about. So again, we're just going to keep up to date with news throughout the week, and I'll discuss that on my team selection / deadline stream, and I'll let you know what I'm doing with Haaland. The next question was, do we need to sell our Arsenal assets ahead of 2 away fixtures? The answer is, again, definitely no. I think especially if they're fit and fine, there's definitely justification to sell Saka if he's an injury doubt. And yes, Jesus with 4 yellow cards, maybe you can justify selling him. But I think the likes of a Martinelli, again, if you've got value tied up, I think there are probably other priorities in our team to potentially target. And I don't think they're the worst fixtures. Chelsea, like I said, have been slightly shaky at the back, and also Wolves can definitely be got at. They're slightly more attacking in recent weeks. So I think they are two, yes, they're not easy fixtures, but they're not terrible either. Then the other question is it worth selling Salah? Like I said, I've just checked, Salah's just scored for Liverpool. So I just think, again, I know I keep sort of saying the same point over again. I think there are other things that places you can focus in your team. If you need the money, like if you really want to go Salah to KDB, I don't mind selling Salah for anyone. Like, I don't have an issue with selling Salah. Yes, his data's still fine, but he's definitely not the same this season. And you're almost definitely not going to captain Salah this week. I guess there's a small chance you would captain him in 16 if Haaland's out. But I guess the person you bring in, you could captain. If you bring in KDB, you could captain KDB. So I think if you're not going to captain Salah anyway, I think you can probably get away with selling him, yeah. But I won't be in my team just because I think there are other places I'd rather use my transfers. I don't mind it, though. Next question is what to do with Foden. I've got no idea. This is a really strange one for me because Foden tends to be Pep's boy. He started the first 13 game weeks of the season, or 12 game weeks of the season, and then 13, 14 he was benched randomly after starting 12 in a row in the Prem. And then Pep was asked in the press conference, was there any reason that Foden's played limited minutes recently? And Pep just said no. I can't remember the exact quote, but it was something along the lines of nope. So I don't know what's happened. I don't know if he's on a naughty step for something he's done outside. I don't know if he's fatigued. I don't know if he's carrying a bit of a knock. As I said last week, when Gundogan actually had back issues either last season or the season before, it took Pep like 6 or 7 weeks to explain that the reason that Gundogan wasn't playing was because he had back issues. So maybe there's something going on there. Maybe he's protecting him ahead of the World Cup. Maybe they've had a bit of a chat and Foden said he wants to be fresh for the World. I don't know. It's all a lot of hypothesizing. Hopefully we get some reasoning soon. It's a similar situation to the 3 other questions in that I'm not going to sell Foden before Fulham because if he plays, it's amazing. And then he's got Brentford. Again, really good fixture. City have the best fixtures over the next 2 and Foden's brilliant. So yeah, maybe if we get a leak that Foden's not starting again, maybe he's a sell. But when I've got money tied up and when I've got other issues to deal with, I'm going to keep Foden. I can't recommend for what I think you should do because I don't know what's happening with Foden and why he's not starting. And then the final question, there was just a few people that are looking to make defensive transfers this week. And of course, we've not really discussed defenders. I think it's a similar situation that you take a punt on a team and a player that you think will keep clean sheets over the next 2. So really do look at the fixtures. But also when it's only for 2 weeks, I think you also want to try and find a player that you think has haul potential. So a player that you think could get an attacking return and a clean sheet. So I'm looking at fixtures and I'm looking at data as well. So 3 players that I've just listed here as an example, go do your own research, is Castagna, Shaw and Dunk. But I think these are 3 players that have attacking potential, especially Castagna and Shaw. And I do like the fixtures for Leicester, Manchester United and Brighton. But I do wonder, unless your defence is a bit of a mess or unless you think these kind of players will do very well, I wonder whether the best use of our transfers at the moment is in defence when there are so many sort of high upside attackers such as a Rashford, Trossard, Wilson that we could be targeting instead. But I guess that's completely team dependent. So hopefully that's helped you. If there are any questions that I haven't answered or any things you want me to discuss, do let me know down below in the comments. I'll try and respond to as many of you as possible. And also make sure to help each other out in the comments as well. So guys, there you have it. That is my Game Week 15 preview / transfer tips video. I do hope this was helpful for you and I hope I covered most of the major dilemmas that we have for the upcoming week. Only 2 weeks now till the World Cup. I'm super excited for a bit of a break from FPL and also World Cup fantasy football content, but almost immediately, like a couple of weeks into the World Cup break, we're going to start thinking about our unlimited transfer teams as well. So if you're excited for all of that content and you want to support me, please do drop a like. Make sure to drop a comment of some kind down below just to feed the algorithm gods. And also make sure to subscribe. We've just hit 50k, but that doesn't mean we need to stop anytime soon. Until next time, guys, thank you very much for watching. Cheers. Bye-bye.